So we'll chant the 5 remembrances. I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. I am the owner of karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, I will be the heir. Thus we should frequently recollect. And let's settle in for our meditation. Listen to the body, make adjustments as needed. And the composure isn't really dependent on the idea of physical stillness. It's more relying on this trust, this fearless trust, or like we belong right in the middle, this very wild and fluid place with this activity of the mind and activity of the body, activity of all things. So we don't have to oppose anything. It's more about harmonizing, aligning with the way it is in the body, mind, all this activity. And perhaps even sensing the great relief of not having to fix anything, not needing the moment to be different, needing it to be some special kind of way. That's a real relief, to allow things to be, to allow things to move as they will. And relaxing and opening to the dance of sensation. What we call the body is this dance of sensation. But so much of the time, the mind is more identified with its thoughts about the body and even mental images that the mind constructs. But the actual reality of sensation is quite alive with change. As if for the first time, what is the nature of this unfolding of sensation? The coming and going of the various sensations throughout the body, pleasant and neutral and unpleasant. And with real curiosity and patience, get interested in the nature of these sensations. And because of continuity, how one moment conditions the next, things can appear to be quite solid, the body, the sensations in the body. But we're looking in a fresh way now, with real patience and real curiosity. And just allow the sensations to reveal themselves for what they are. So it's this receptivity, we're letting the body, this movement of sensation, we're allowing it to reveal itself in this great, vast, open, trusting, tender quality of knowing. Just allow the sensations to reveal themselves. And notice what's present when the body feels substantial and personal. What are the supporting causes for that perception of the body being solid and personal? And what are the causes, the supporting causes for when there's a different perception of the body? It takes real interest in the way it is, and a real integrity for the mind not to be caught in its idea of the body. It's all about the sincerity of interest and the steadiness or steadfastness of this interest. And in this way we can actually, if it's not overwhelming, we can be grateful for some physical pain. It really provides a more steady way to connect with the body, because the pain, the painful sensation will have the appearance of being steady or permanent. So we can practice just receiving the sensations and letting them reveal themselves for what they are. Not imposing any idea on our experience. And you might notice that even the sense of me being the observer is not so different. That experience is not so different than the awareness of the sensations of the body. Just another thing being known. The sense of one observing is something being known. The sense of sensation is being known. And we're just allowing everything to reveal itself. keeping the theme of the meditation really simple. We're letting what we call the body, we're letting it reveal itself. Doing our best to have a fresh or open mind, not to project any expectations. And to experiment with a more open curiosity, humble curiosity. So be willing to begin again and again. Our wise elders tell us that opening to the underlying nature of things, like the nature of sensation, we're told that this is liberating. So this is something we can check out. Is it liberating? We're not trying to liberate the mind, we're intending to open to the way it is and see if that supports the liberation of our heart, the letting go of what's extra. And again, it's really about the sincerity or integrity of our interest, our willingness to develop this capacity we have to be open and receptive. So in our practice, we're taught that the liberating truth is here and now. We don't need a different moment, a better moment. And the hard part is this interest, remembering to be interested and sustaining it. It's very easy for the mind to get caught up in what it thinks it knows, what it thinks is happening. And then the mind loses this capacity to be open and receptive. And take a moment, stretch the body as you need to, make adjustments. This is from Joseph Goldstein. I put this article in among the resources, so you can read the article if you want. It's actually an interview. I find it very powerful to pay attention, moment by moment, to the experience of things changing, rather than just getting lost in the content of what is happening. It is simultaneously possible to pay attention to the fact that experience keeps altering and flowing. This is not such a difficult thing to do, but it is difficult to remember to do it. And we have this, built-in mechanism, I think I mentioned it in the past, with the flow of experience. Part of the mind is taking a few bits here and there and constructing a story about what's going on. So we lose that possibility of the immediacy, like being awake, being open to the immediacy, not just the bodily sensations, it could be any aspect of our experience, but it's really about the immediacy of experiencing where the mind isn't attending to the interpretation, but is letting the immediacy of experience have its effect. So that's a nice way to conceptualize it. It's like any moment, the underlying reality is here in any moment, and wrong view, wrong understanding, or deludedness doesn't have a chance when the mind is open to the way it is. The way it is will challenge and transform wrong view, wrong understanding. So it kind of gives us a sense of how omnipresent, the conceiving mind is, and then the mind identifying with its conceptions. I'm at common ground right now. I'm giving a talk right now. We'll have small groups next week, and Really work, and not just in formal sitting times, but all day long, whenever you can remember. Really work with that idea that the underlying nature is always here and always capable of transforming our mind, our heart. And the hard part is, remembering that potential and getting out of the way. We have to be awake without thinking about being awake. We have to practice without being caught in our ideas of, I want to practice now. I want to be a sincere practitioner. I really want to do it. This would be good for me to do it. And hopefully we get a little bit of a sense of the task at hand. When we get a little continuity, we just see how many off-ramps there are for the mind to conceive about this or that, whatever the mind conceives about, and get entangled to some degree in what the mind is conceiving or thinking about. It's hard, really hard to be simple. And of course, part of that is that as the mind does get sort of open, simply open, receptive, there's a lot of energy there. And that triggers more mental constructions, more conceiving. Like, oh, this is getting interesting, right? It's like a million ways, maybe infinite number of ways for the mind to pull away, in a sense. I mean, not that there's a place to go. It doesn't really pull away, but it gets in a bubble, its own conception, its own idea about things, whatever it's thinking about, and then the way the mind identifies with that. So tonight, in our theme of impermanence, one of the characteristics of existence, I want to talk more about the kind of experience that arises more when the mind is really settled and stable. So you could call it like subtle impermanence or radical impermanence. And probably, I'm guessing most of you have heard different teachers talk about it at different times. This is from a very well-known Thai scholar and practitioner, The Three Signs. It's a book on the three characteristics by Payutto is his name. And in the introduction to the book, he writes, "The primary Buddhist tenet that all things can be separated into component parts is not intended to suggest a static world of composite objects, but rather all things are seen to exist in the form of a stream. Each constituent element of that stream comes into being dependent on all other elements in an unbroken flow of appearance and decline. No single element has an independent fixed identity. They're all impermanent and unstable. Indeed, the fluid nature of phenomena is possible owing to the interdependence and insubstantiality of their components. The stream of interdependent phenomena is constant and certain, and it is a part of the natural order. It does not rely for its existence on a god, religion, or prophet. In the Buddhist teachings, the role of the Buddha is that of discovering and explaining this truth to others. The Buddha presented the teaching of the three characteristics to describe the natural law of flux. The teaching is outlined in this way. Whether a Buddha appears or not, these truths are constant and stable. That is, all conditioned phenomena are impermanent. All conditioned phenomena are dukkha, unsatisfactory. All things are not self, non-self. And it's a little bit like if you've studied any of the quantum physics, particles and waves, and there's something about, that subtle world of quantum physics that reality is here now. And it's not like we're waking up to something new. We're just waking up to the way it is. And it's not even that we have to figure out the way that it is. We just need to let it have its effect. And the natural effect of seeing the underlying nature of things is having a lighter attitude about things, the non-clinging, the non-grasping, the not taking things personally. That's the effect. And that's all we care about in a way, and that's all we look for, is how am I changed? Like I'm interested in this, seeing things as they are, let's say. And I'm interested precisely because I'm told from my tradition, from my elders, my teachers, that it has impact. Like it changes how the mind relates. I mean, in a really gross, not in a gross in a bad sense, but sort of obvious sense, when a close friend dies or a close relative dies, we're changed by that. It's like that experience of seeing somebody who was there, or even a pet, it's such an interesting experience. I'm guessing most of you have had it in some way in your life. That being was there, and then they're not there. And it really messes with the way the mind conceives of things. And we're changed by that. And so when we're observing the body like we did tonight, because we have this, it's called delusion, we have this idea, arrogance of what the body is. It's like this solid thing here. I know it's solid because I can touch it, I can feel it. I feel that it's twisted steel. Don't tell me it's not the way it is, because that's my experience. But that experience, the story we're telling ourselves about the body, like so much of our visceral sense of the body is being conditioned by the story we have about the body. You see how it's a trap? We think, no, the visceral experience, I'm seeing it fresh and real, and my story is coming, my interpretation is based on that actual data that I have. And it's hard to get out of that loop. It's hard to approach or open to the body without the opening, the receptivity being affected by what we expect to find. You should do that. You can do that with friends too. It's like you connect with someone, but you really work on not sort of bringing your idea of the person into the mix. Or any experience whatsoever. It doesn't have to be with another person, another being. Go into the bathroom and do what you do in a bathroom, but without the idea that I'm going into the bathroom to do what I do in the bathroom. This is a little bit more from this beginning of this book on the three characteristics. All things exist in a state of flux, made up of interdependent conditioning factors which arise and pass away in unbroken succession. Things are impermanent. Because of their instability and causal dependence, things are subject to stress and friction, revealing an inherent imperfection. And since each component likewise exists as a continuous, causally dependent flow, things do not have a distinct individuality. They do not have a true substance or core. And that's why impermanence is one way to talk about this first characteristic. And we'll go through all three. Shelley, starting in late February, we'll start another class on dukkha, this unsatisfactory characteristic. And then I told the group originally that it would be in the summer, but it's actually late spring. I'll be teaching, I forget what it is, maybe 4-week class on anatta, the impersonal nature. So we'll cover it between this class and we'll end in May with the class that I'm teaching on anatta. And remember, they're not like 3 different things, they're just 3 angles on this. But our experience of this, the present moment, as I mentioned a moment ago, is so dependent on the way that we perceive it, and our perceptions are colored by habit. And, we conceive it this way, and it's like it gets well greased. We keep conceiving things the same way over and over again. So how do we break that? How do we break out of that rut, the way we perceive any aspect of our experience? Well, we develop mindful awareness. So mindful awareness, it isn't like this superficial tool. It's a very powerful tool. And it's good to have some humility about the power of our mindfulness or the development of our mindfulness. That's why phrases like from Thich Nhat Hanh, where he calls it the miracle of mindfulness, which, we want to roll our eyes. But when the mindful awareness is really pure, it's an altered state. Like our experience is different. It's not our normal state of awareness. The stream entry, this first deep insight that changes the mind in a way that can't be undone is one way to think about it. And there's all kinds of, in the tradition, about what the implications of stream entry, that first deep insight into awakening. But it's often described as like when somebody articulates what happened or what they saw or what the mind understood, all things arise and pass away. All conditioned things come and go. And in the bottom chant, what we'll probably do next week, at least talk about it, but it's a common thing used at Buddhist funerals, but it's a very deep teaching. It's underneath the 5 remembrances. But the basic translation is all conditioned things arise and pass away. Understanding this deeply leads to the greatest happiness, which is peace. So that's the basic line of someone who's had a stream entry experience. Oh, whatever this is, it's not worthy of grasping. And there's a taste of that peace of the mind not being confused by existence, by sense experience. Like, I don't know, it's not like I've got a treatise of the philosophical truth of reality, or something like that. All that's left is this relief that whatever this life is, grasping doesn't make sense. And so, as insight deepens, that's what's left over. The sort of integrated sense, grasping doesn't make sense, attachment doesn't make sense, identification doesn't make sense. And of course, the impact of the insight really depends on the subtlety. So in this work, more subtlety, more refinement of attention, more stability of that present moment awareness the more impactful the insight will be. You know, we can be sitting on the dock looking out at the lake, you know, and watching the light play on the surface, reflect on the surface of the water, and, you know, with our beer and hanging out with our friends, and have the thought like, oh wow, that light, that flickering just keeps flickering. But that our life isn't going to be changed by that insight. But if with a greater stability and purity of present moment awareness, we see that insubstantial, unfixed nature of our thoughts or of the body or any aspect of experience, if it's deep enough, it's really hard for the mind to imagine, to believe that things are substantial in the ways that we probably are thinking that now. People can, when they have deep insight, they can be really disoriented for a while. You know, it's sort of like, what is it the way it is? It's strong medicine. And you don't have to do, you know, hallucinogens or other things that are getting popular again. Right? We can just learn how to open to the way it is. And it's really important to keep reminding us that it's the sort of ephemeral, insubstantial, inconstant nature. It's not like a mistake. It's just the way it is. And it's said in the tradition, I don't know if I've mentioned this in the past couple of weeks, but you know, there are these three gateways that I mentioned we're going to be teaching on. So impermanence now in the winter, and then Shelley with dukkha, the unsatisfactory nature, and then I'll teach again on anatta, the impersonal nature. That each of these three are seen as like a gateway, a way to support insight into the way it is, like a doorway into the truth of the underlying nature. And each person, maybe you could say, because of their particular spiritual temperament, just like we have certain temperaments, you know, babies have certain temperaments. Well, spiritually, we also have certain temperaments, like to have an attraction towards dukkha, or an attraction towards the impersonal nature of things, or the attraction towards impermanence. But it said that to open to the impermanent nature of experience takes a lot of faith, a lot of courage. And to open to the dukkha nature of thing takes a lot of concentration. And to open to the impersonal nature of things takes a lot of wisdom, right? So some people are more of a wisdom type, some people are more of a concentration type, that's their particular talent. Some people just have a lot of that faith energy, right? And so maybe that will help, you know, especially if you do all three of the classes on the three characteristics. But they're not different things, like I said a moment ago. They're just different doorways into the same thing, which is the underlying nature of things. Thich Nhat Hanh says, enlightenment, peace, and joy will not be granted by someone else. The well is within us, and if we dig deeply in the present moment, the water will spring forth. So I mentioned that I put this interview from Inquiring Mind, in the list of other resources for those of you who are going to do some studying. So I'd encourage, this is a nice one to read. Inquiring Mind was a journal. It doesn't exist anymore, but for a long time it was sort of the journal of our Vipassana insight meditation community here in the West. for several decades before it stopped printing. So maybe it's Wes Nisker who was the person interviewing Joseph, I'm not sure. He and Barbara Gates were the editors for many years. But anyway, the journal asks Joseph, so the three characteristics are skillful means, and a mind without clinging is the fruit. And Joseph says, that's right. The three characteristics are not just philosophical statements about the nature of the universe. That is not what's important. That is not what is important. They are practices. There is a great paradox here because these truths are at once both obvious and hidden. They are obvious when we make the right effort to actually awaken to them in the moment. And they are hidden when we are simply carried along by the habit energies of our lives. For example, on one level, impermanence is so obvious to almost everyone that on the whole, we generally ignore it. It is such an ordinary truth that we don't give it any importance. And yet, when we do pay attention to it, when we bring some real interest and energy to that scene, when we're actually vitally experiencing the impermanence of our present experience, in that moment, the mind is not clinging. This is an immediate fruit, a mind free of contraction, a relaxed heart. And I do this a lot, so I'm guessing most of you have heard me offer this reflection, but like in any moment, like this moment, we can reflect how like this moment now has become the past. And as the past, it doesn't really exist somewhere back there, right? So, and the future isn't here yet. There's no future in front of me. Just sense this as I'm talking. So we have the present moment, which is always disappearing and doesn't exist. The past doesn't exist. And any idea I have about that previous second, that idea is here, and then it's gone. And the future isn't here. So you get like, this is what we don't get, that right here, the present moment is so, I don't know what the right word is, but thin or ephemeral. It's here and it's gone. So the next arising, but before that next arising is become a thing, a moment of experience never becomes a thing. It has that appearance because, the mind is interpreting it. It's telling a story. The story of me seems substantial. The story of Minnesota seems substantial. The story of Monday, January, whatever it is, 27th, can seem substantial. But the actual experience of any moment isn't substantial. Joseph, in this interview, he gives the example. For a while, when he was younger, Joseph was really into kayaking and whitewater rafting. And he says if you do it enough, you transition from your strategy there, holding, and panicking, as you see what you're going down. If you haven't gone down one of those rivers in one of those rafts, it's really amazing because you think you're going to die many times. I've only done it a few times, so I never got beyond the panic stage, panicking and holding tight. But he talks about after enough experience, that the liberating quality, the relaxing and the going with it starts to come online more than the panic and the squeeze and holding, right? And that's sort of, we've gotten used to the idea of permanence. So the reality of impermanence is going to freak out the part of the mind that has gotten conditioned to trust and count on the idea of permanence. But that doesn't mean impermanence is actually scary. And it's always been impermanent. It's not like we're waking up to impermanence. We're just coming in line with the way it's always been. So if it was going to kill us, or whatever impermanence is, we'd already be done with. There's a little bit more here I wanted to read from Joseph's. Just because it's good to hear these different voices. So the journal asks him, how would you describe impermanence? Impermanence is the constant, basic, universal truth of change. Impermanence is both a process of continual loss, in which things exist and then disappear. It's also the process of continuous rebirth or creativity, in which things that do not exist suddenly appear. And you can do that just casually even, as you're going through your day, just get a sense of what's bursting on the scene, whether it's a thought or a memory or what's happening around you. And the same thing, I was saying with that reflection, the future isn't here, but all of a sudden it is here. The next moment is here. And the past, so you can attune to the bursting forth, what Joseph here is calling rebirth, the arising, or you can get really interested in what's ceasing or passing away or ending, disappearing. It's like we take birth into a conversation, and we're on the phone with a friend, and then it's over. We really sense, oh, it's over. That's it. Nowhere to be seen. And any thoughts I have about it, that's a thought now, but it's not the conversation I was having with my friend. It's a mental image of it, or it's an idea of it. For example, sounds, thoughts, and sensations continually are disappearing and new ones arising. We can also see it very clearly in the ordinary circumstances of our lives. Where has our experience of breakfast gone by mid-morning? Where is the conversation we had with a friend by the next afternoon? Sometimes we are more aware of things arising, sometimes we notice they're passing away. But change is always obvious when we pay attention. And one more thing I wanted to read here. Because once we start building confidence, which we'll notice because we'll be interested in change, then part of what we want to do is check out things like, okay, I get that's changing. But to begin to notice where we haven't been reflective, like me, the observer, that's constant. But what I'm observing, that's changing. But to start to notice that even that sense of me who's observing change is also inconstant. That's not because that's a habit that people who are students of the Buddhist teachings can fall into, which is to rarefy the self as awareness. But we can see that even that comes and goes. And sometimes the perception will arise as, it's like the same, you're just tracking moment-to-moment experience, but there will be a sense that, okay, this moment is being known, and then there will be the next moment is being known, and the next moment, you know how this goes. There's knowing. But all of a sudden the perception, something will arise in the perception that this moment being known, and then the next moment being known, whichever that next moment is, that they're sort of obviously connected because it looks the same, it's the same, makes sense. But this is a different reality than that. That will be the actual perception in the mind or the sense. It's like this moment with me up here talking, and then this moment, there's a connection between those moments. But it's like, they're not the same. There's this idea of continuity sort of wants to tell us that, no, it's still me, it's still the same moment, sort of. I'm still in front of the group at common ground. But our experience will challenge that. When the mind, mindful awareness is really stable, there'll be more like a staccato sense that any moment where there's awareness, it will feel like, no, this, it's like its own, this very thin little moment is its own reality. And yeah, it might be conditioned or related to other moments, but it's not the same moment. And that's why in the early Buddhist tradition, if someone would ask a teacher, I want to know what happens at the time of death, you'll get sometimes the answer, well, just pay close attention to your experience and you'll see the birth and death experience right now. Because that's happening in every moment. There's a reality that arises and it ceases. And that's what's so liberating. It's, that's why in the tradition, awakening is sometimes referred to as the deathless, because it removes the drama around birth and death, the deepening of insight. It really challenges, the kind of seriousness the mind an untrained mind tends to bring to the issue of birth and death. So let me just finish this section. So they asked Joseph, we can see change happening all around us, but isn't it important to see that we ourselves are changing? And Joseph says, that's a good point. Seeing impermanence will not be so effective if we still believe that the observer is solid or rarefied. The awareness of impermanence must include ourselves, the observer, for it to be a place of real freedom. This can be a very subtle matter. We may know that our thoughts and feelings keep changing, but have we investigated the very nature of the knowing mind? What is consciousness? And is it permanent as well? Is it impermanent as well? Of course, it's easy for me to ask these questions sitting here talking to you. The real challenge is for us to look deeply and see for ourselves or non-selves. The example that's often used is like a movie projector, the old kind of projectors, where they had each, as the film was running through the projector, they're just all these different frames. But when you're watching the film, and if it's a dark room, you can get really sucked in. It really looks kind of like a reality, and we experience it that way if it's a good movie. But if they slowed it down, or if you somehow saw each frame, it would really lose its seductiveness, right? It's like, or even just if the walls were removed and you just saw the trees and the sunlight and, and heard the bustle of traffic, it would be hard to stay intoxicated with the movie. So part of the mind being captivated by its conceptions of things, it depends on, the different supporting causes for delusion. And when those causes are taken away, the delusion doesn't hold up. The mind can't keep it alive. It falls apart. This is from Andy Olensky, another Buddhist scholar and teacher that I've taught with at times, but also studied with. Sensory information hurtles upon our eyeballs at the speed of light, crashing into our eardrums at the speed of sound, and courses through our body and mind as fast as an electrochemical signal can flash from one neuron to the next. How do we deal with all this data without getting overwhelmed? By blocking out most of it and stepping down the voltage on what little is left. The brain freezes the world into discrete mind moments, each capturing a barely adequate morsel of information, then processes these one by one in a linear sequence. The result is a compiled virtual world of experience, more or less patterned on what's out there, but mostly organized around the needs and limitations of the apparatus constructing it, us. It is like the brain and its senses are hastily taking a series of snapshots, then stringing them together into a movie called the stream of consciousness. The Buddhists have a pretty good word to describe this system, delusion. It doesn't mean we are stupid, only that the mind and body are designed, so to speak, to distort reality in some very fundamental ways. For starters, each moment of consciousness creates an artificial node of stability out of a background that is thoroughly in flux. And the Buddha says, practitioners, there is no bodily form, whatever. There is no feeling, whatever. There is no perception, whatever. There is no formation, whatever. There's no consciousness, whatever, that is permanent, everlasting, eternal, not subject to change, that will last as long as eternity. Then the Buddha took a small piece of cow dung in his hand and told the practitioner, if even this much of permanent, everlasting, eternal, individual selfhood, not subject to change, could be found in you, then this living a life of purity, living a spiritual life could not be described as for the complete exhaustion of suffering. There wouldn't be a path of liberation. It's precisely like, it's not that you or I, we practice sincerely, and then you or I get to a really safe spot because of our spiritual practice. It's being a sincere spiritual practitioner, the mind realizes that this process that we call me, I, me, mine, Mark, right? That process doesn't have that changing process, that what Mark is this changing process. It's like any other aspect of nature. So there isn't somebody who needs a safe spot to be on or to go to. That's the spiritual awakening. That's hard to conceive of. But that kind of yearning for safety, that childlike spiritual yearning for safety, like the grandparent in the sky that will love us unconditionally. It's not that if we peel what that is, it's actually quite useful. But the way our mind interprets the problem isn't very helpful, right? Because then we go, that's what makes us so susceptible to, cults and politicians and consumerism and all these sort of gods that we fall in love with and become devoted to that end up, we end up being betrayed because they don't deliver. And it's all based on not understanding what this is, being a human being is. One Thai elder, monastic from Thailand, said that when one has deep insight, realizes freedom, it won't matter to them that the freedom is impersonal. The experience of freedom is what is important. What's not important is, like when we say, like I've been saying or trying to say, that about how there isn't somebody who needs safety. But when the heart experiences real safety, that comes from the practice, it doesn't matter that it isn't personal, that it isn't me who's being saved. It's not that I want to be saved, I just want this heavy, existential, uneasy feeling to go away, right? And it does go away with practice, with spiritual insight. So here's Jack Kornfield talking about this more subtle perception of impermanence. As mindfulness and concentration get more highly developed in our meditation, we can use this strong awareness to examine our world more closely, under a constant and powerful attention that keeps focusing on the present moment. Our life dissolves into fleeting moments of sense perceptions, changing every instant. This level of insight can be called dissolving the rapidity. It brings into vision each momentary arising and passing of experience at the sense doors, so that what has ordinarily appeared as a solid movie of ourselves and the world around us literally breaks apart under the gaze of this refined attention. With strong concentration, we can actually perceive the individual moments of sense impact and of our recognition and reaction to them, like seeing frames arise one by one very rapidly on a movie screen. This is a dramatic and liberating level of practice. Wherever in the body or mind we turn our attention, dissolves into microscopic moments, granules of life arising and dissolving. Even the observing dissolves moment after moment, passing too quickly to count or grasp. Now we can actually experience what is meant by the stream of events and feel directly how life is impermanent on all levels. And I'm guessing we've had this experience to some degree. Anybody who's been sitting for a while, and then you're sitting with physical pain, for example, or it works with emotional pain too, but I mentioned in the guided sit tonight, pain has, it has the appearance of stability, when something's hurting, like my knee aches or whatever it might be, pain in the back, being a little cold, or whatever it might be, that's it's like has that stability. So it's nice because it can be useful for gathering the energies of the mind, so they're just unifying around its interest, the mind's interest in this phenomena. And so we're settling. We're not trying to see something, we're just receiving, and letting the experience be what it is. And I don't know if people know this experience, but it's pretty common. But like when you do have a lot of pain, and you develop some of that stability I was just talking about, it's like totally workable. It's not that the mind isn't aware that, oh yeah, the knee hurts, or the back hurts, or whatever the pain is. It knows that, but for some reason it's not a problem. But if the concentration, if the stability of present moment awareness were to waver, all of a sudden that pain is completely not workable. And I really got to get out of here, or I got to move my body, but then you reestablish the continuity, and it's really workable. I mean, people like myself, who've been practicing for a long time, when life has conspired to make me really miserable, I want to go sit, because I know if I sit, and I practice being with whatever's moving, whatever's happening, that the heaviness of that, the squeeze of whatever it is that's causing my suffering, will be modified. And it's because the mind is going from its ordinary state. It's not so much the particular pain, it's really more the story the mind is telling itself about this pain, like, I can't stand this pain, or it's unfair that I'm feeling this pain, or whatever. We don't distinguish between the phenomena and the mind's interpretation of the phenomena. It's just like, this thing is happening to me. But when we're sitting, we do distinguish, right? We know not to see or get confused by the interpretation, and we just kind of hone in on, whether it's an emotional feeling that is sort of sparking all the drama, or some physical pain that's sparking all the drama, and we just feel its underlying nature. We see the three characteristics. We see its changing nature. We see that whenever there's any grasping, any taking it personally, it becomes dukkha. Its dukkha natures. And we see that we begin to see, it's at the more subtle end of the practice, but just that framing it as I, me, or mine, and has implications. And when there's just more the stability of awareness without the overlay of claiming it as I, me, or mine, then it changes. It's not as heavy. It's not as unworkable. And it's really good. It's almost like seeing at times where the mind can shift, oh, I'm the suffering one. Life is a problem. Oh, nobody who's suffering is here. And then back and forth. Because we want to get to that place in our practice where when we feel like we're suffering, then what arises is, yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's optional. Like, yeah, right now I'm a suffering being. And I've had enough experience in life that it doesn't have to be this way. Doesn't mean my circumstances can change or that the physical pain can go away. Maybe, maybe not, just depends on its causes. But the mind turning it into suffering is always optional. So then when there is the appearance of me being a suffering person, then right with that comes curiosity, like, what am I not seeing? Well, maybe I'm not seeing the subtle changing nature. Or maybe I'm not seeing the impersonal nature, or seeing that grasping is the cause for dukkha. Craving is the cause for dukkha, wanting it to be other than the way it is. This is a good example. I'll end with this. I think I've mentioned off and on that I really like Sharon Salzberg's, one of her earlier books, Heart as Wide as the World. So if you haven't read that, it's probably worth a read at some point. And pretty early in the book, she has a chapter on seeing pain. And she talks about her early years. She went to India when she was quite young, I think after her freshman or sophomore year in college. But she started college quite young. So I think she was only 19, even though she was like 2 years through college. Anyway, went to India and started doing a lot of retreats with Goenkaji, a very well-known Vipassana teacher who's dead now, but started a movement. Some of you probably have done some of the Goenka retreats because they have centers all over the world. And they do the sweeping technique. But anyway, Sharon just talks about how much pain she had sitting and couldn't sit comfortably, and a lot of us can relate to that. And just how ineffective she was with physical pain, like always moving her body. Of course, that doesn't really help. It just creates habits. By letting the thought rule me, I was essentially adding minutes or days or lifetime of anticipated pain to the present moment pain, thinking about how am I going to get through this hour sit. Trying to face it all at once, I felt helpless and overwhelmed. In fact, I could have borne quite well what was happening in any given moment, but my fears about the future made the suffering unbearable. And she just talks about all the other things, like comparing oneself to other meditators that just make the whole thing worse. But at some point, her practice started to settle down. And this is the part I wanted to read. We often believe that we should be able to make pain go away. rarely do we sit down and, in an open, relaxed, non-judgmental way, genuinely explore the pain in our lives. Meditation practice is a powerful tool for revealing our conditioned reactions to unpleasant experiences, allowing us to penetrate to the very depth. Opening to painful experiences does not mean a passive acceptance of pain. Rather, we learn to go to the heart of each moment's experience, even if it is painful, because there, unclouded by conditioning, we discover our lives. And that's the key, that mindful awareness, that steady continuity with the object. It's a way of breaking the spell, the mind's fixation on its conceptions of what's going on, like, why me? The effort to push away what is unpleasant, the tendency to project pain into the future, and then feel overcome by it, the interpretations we add to it all keep us from having a personal, direct, and intimate acquaintance with what we're actually experiencing. So when we observe something like pain directly, we come to see its actual nature. Like everything else, pain is a changing phenomena with no inherent substance. Now, it's okay to kind of want to roll your eyes at that, like that's not my experience of pain. But like Sharon said at the beginning of this paragraph, we have to be honest, we haven't actually been interested in pain in a fresh way. When we look at pain, we generally are looking at it as a personal problem. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in my own practice and how many times in practice interviews with people that I'm leading on retreat, they'll come in and say, yeah, I'm being aware of this pain, but they clearly want it to go away. Well, that's not being open, wanting it to go away. When we want it to go away, there's somebody who doesn't like it, who's practicing being open to it so it goes away. But we're not really opening to it. So we want to learn this lesson when there's enough confidence, enough safety to really actually be interested. And so initially, we have to call on confidence and faith. I'm just going to feel this. Can I just feel this? Even if it seems like it's going to kill me. And like Sharon was saying a little bit earlier, the thought, we think about this sit is for 60 minutes or for 30 minutes. And we think, yeah, maybe it's okay now, but there's 25 more minutes here. Well, that becomes an unworkable idea. Like it's like me being up here thinking, okay, I'm 66, I'll probably keep doing this until I'm 74. So how many more Buddhist studies talks do I have to give? It would totally freak me out. It's like, I can't do that. I'm not gonna. But can I do the next sentence? Yeah, I can, I can just keep doing that moment by moment. Same, I'm sure some of you raising kids have that same thought, they're 3, they'll probably live at home until they're 26. 23 years times 365 days a year, and how many minutes, how many seconds, oh, no way. So I got to give the happy ending before we run out of time. Eventually, I found that my legs relaxed, my knees reached the floor. I could sit for long periods of time with no pain. Yet, I was, in fact, released from my terrible fear of pain long before then, before her body sort of got used to sitting. When I saw the seeming solidity of the pain, rather than viewing it as a monolithic entity taking over my body, I saw the pain as a kaleidoscopic world of ever-shifting sensations, tingling, tightness, heat, throbbing, and 1,000 other qualities of sensation. These were what I had been lumping together and calling pain, right? That's the interpretation. She writes, by seeing these component parts all in essence temporalist and ephemeral, I finally learned to explore the texture of pain rather than feeling crushed by it. And she goes on and talks of doing it with emotional pain too, not just physical pain. So let's just leave it here, let go of the words for a moment, take a breath or two together. Yeah, and each of us in our own way, just resolving to be a really good student, a sincere student of the way it is. And to cultivate that stability of awareness and interest. And you can join in for the half-day retreat this coming Saturday. I'll be leading it in the afternoon, 1 to 5. If you know anybody who's interested in an intro class, Shelley Graff will be coming back this weekend from teaching at the Forest Refuge, and we'll offer a 4-week intro class starting a week from tomorrow. What is that, the 3rd or 4th of February, 6:30 to 8:30 for 4 Tuesdays. So if you know anybody, they can sign up for that. Other things coming up, I know that Rick and Pietro, you're doing, is that this weekend? Yeah? So a week from Thursday. Yeah, so Rick Condon, our treasurer, but also one of our practice leaders out at the retreat center, and Pietro Ferrero will be doing that. And you can just go online, just look on that Thursday, a week from this Thursday, and you'll see the link for to register for those practices. It's like a family-style retreat, usually 5 to 10 people in our beautiful, cozy retreat center. Yeah, it's really a beautiful place. So if you haven't been out there, consider getting out. And there will be other opportunities. Shelley's going to do a 2-week teacher-led practice period, so you can go for parts of that the first 2 weeks of April. So keep that in mind as well. Oh, and one last thing. Usually we have someone who's been around the community for a couple of years who just have figured a good way to participate in that circle of giving and receiving here at the center and just other places in their lives. And they can give like a 2 to 5 minute talk on dana or generosity. And we usually do it one of the last weeks of the class. So if anybody wants to do it, just send me an email and I'll give you more details. Have a good week of practice, everyone. See you next Monday night. Thanks for coming by, everyone on Zoom.